Well, I'd like to welcome everybody out to I guess this is the opening conversation of the American Atheists Conference 2015 in Memphis, Tennessee. The reason we're here today is to better understand some of the myths and misconceptions that the general public seems to hold about various religions and worldviews, to talk about the engines and drivers of these misunderstandings, and to maybe even talk about antidotes and the things we can do to have a more honest, forthright conversation and develop a more civil society. So I'm Chris Davis. I'm a reporter for the Memphis Flyer, and I will be your moderator for this event. And I guess we'll start by just letting the panel introduce themselves.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Can you hear me?
Barely.
We have no
Still
power on the
nothing.
microphones.
You have to push
Oh, is there a button?
There's a microphone button. Okay. Hi everybody. Thank you all for coming. My name is David Silverman. I'm the president of American Atheists. We're the ones who are sponsoring this event, and as well as sponsoring the National Convention for American Atheists, which begins tomorrow and goes through the weekend. It's going to be a fantastic convention, and I'm really, really happy to welcome everybody here. Thank you all for coming to participate on this panel discussion, to raise awareness of the diversity of the beautiful Memphis County, Memphis City. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mohammed Sayed from Ex-Muslims of North America. We're a community building organization that is trying to unify ex-Muslim voices across Canada and the US. I'm very happy to be here. This is, I think, the largest presence of ex-Muslims at any conference. Ayaan Hirsi Ali is going to be here. There are 4 or 5 other ex-Muslims that are presenting at various points during the conference. Thank you all for attending.
My name is Cole Huffman. I'm the senior pastor at First Evangelical Church, which is in I-240 Poplar area of Memphis. I've been there 12 years, married, I have children.
My name is Yasser Khaldi. I am the resident scholar of the Memphis Islamic Center. I'm also a professor of religious studies at Rhodes College.
All right, so let's get started with kind of the big question. And the big question is, what do you consider to be some of the more important misunderstandings about your religion or worldview? And let's just start here and move down the table.
Well, the most important misconception about atheism is that we don't exist. That's the biggest problem that we're facing. That people don't think atheism exists, or people think that atheists are such a small minority that we can be discounted. As a result, it is politically correct to trash atheists in front, trash atheists from the stage, talk poorly about us. It is politically correct for politicians to just throw us under the bus for any kind of reason that they want. So I think the biggest problem that we atheists have is that people think we don't count. People think we're not enough to count. And one of the reasons that we bring our conventions to Memphis this year, Salt Lake City last year, is because people assume in a Bible Belt city such as Memphis that everybody's Christian. Oh, everybody's religious at least. And no, there are tons and tons of atheists right here in Memphis, and we're here to raise the awareness of the fact that Memphis is a beautifully diverse city.
So going off what David said, the same thing exists among Muslim circles as well. If you ask most Muslims, they will say that ex-Muslims don't exist, doubt does not exist. The idea is that everything within Islam is perfect, and therefore nobody can really doubt if you do not walk away from the truth. If you look at about 14 countries in the world, criminalize apostasy and kill you for publicly stating that you're not Muslim. Because of that, there's a huge chilling effect, and most people that do not believe aren't willing to speak about it publicly. Even people that have written anonymously have been tracked down and arrested in various countries. Even in the US, we launched in 2013. It was the first time any organization had ever tried to work and build up ex-Muslims. So in the 21st century, we still have to operate in private because we're concerned about consequences. And I would say pretty much every single ex-Muslim that has been open has received death threats at one point or the other.
So I've been asked to represent the Christian perspective, and when you think about misconceptions, a number of things you can point to. Some misconceptions are going to be born out of more of a culture warrior sort of dynamic that we know well in American culture. As a pastor, specifically, I would say that probably a misconception that I find both inside the church and outside the church is that Christianity is essentially a religion for good people. It's for people who are proving their worth to God. Now again, this is inside the church as well as outside the church, but it's a misconstrual of what Christian faith is. So the goodness within the Christian dynamic is something that comes as one responds to God. It's not something we do to get God's favor and approval. It's something that we give ourselves to, namely the Lord's will and way as we find it in Scripture. We give ourselves to that in response to what He's done for us. So that Christian emphasis on good works, for instance, is not for the purpose of gaining God's approval or keeping it. It is because God has already given His approval in Christ, and that frees us then to not have to work for our redemption or salvation. It means that we're the good things we give ourselves to, we're responding to Him. So that's a misconception that I'm sure others will come up as we talk, but that's one that right off the bat I encounter a lot in pastoral work in particular.
I think 2 minutes is not enough for misconceptions about Islam. But I think the number one in our times would be the fact that Islam is somehow the greatest source of terrorism and crimes related to political violence in the world. Firstly, statistically, that is simply not correct. Yes, there are Muslim terrorist groups, but all you need to do is look at the FBI's most wanted page, and there's a far greater threat from, for example, the far right here in America than there is from Islamic radicals. So the fact that it's not the most quantity-wise, and also what is, and of course I'm a very vocal critic of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Anybody who Googles my name, you'll see the fact that they've actually threatened to assassinate and kill me as well. But the point is that one needs to understand the socio-political context from within which these terrorist groups emerge. They're not coming from a vacuum, and it's very easy to blame simply the religion of Islam. My argument is, and I'm very precise here, yes, there are tenets of Islam that can be misconstrued and feed into radicalism. But the primary cause of Islamic terrorism is a response to socio-political factors, not a reading of the Quran. And a simple example of this is ISIS. If you look at our foreign policy in Iraq for the last 30 years, the number of wars and bombings and people killed, it's only natural that there's going to be messianic cults that are being formed that have these bizarre visions of the world. One cannot ignore the reality of the people and the socio-political context from within which these groups emerge. So my point is that Islam is not inherently any more prone to violence than any other system out there, whether it's Christianity or Judaism, whether it's capitalism or democracy. The fact of the matter is that there are people around the world that do violence in the name of whatever they believe, and Muslims are also guilty of the same thing all other human beings are guilty of.
All right. Now let's start at the other end and sort of follow up on that question, which might be some of the more accurate ways to frame or explain the things that are actually believed, what the actual tenets are. And again, I know that 2 minutes is way too short a time for anyone to accomplish this, but.
So I actually gave a lecture here in Memphis 2 days ago about the reality of radical Islam. It was a public lecture here in Memphis for a predominantly non-Muslim audience. And I went into a lot more detail about the rise of ISIS. And I did mention in that lecture that if you look at the circumstances of Iraq, from going from one of the most technologically advanced Middle Eastern countries in the 1970s to basically being bombed into the Middle Ages for the last 30 years from our sanctions and our 2 wars, the fact of the matter is that the entire civil infrastructure of that country has been demolished, primarily by us, the great superpower of the world. One needs to contextualize in that environment. People will cling on to things that are familiar to them, and Islam is very familiar to the people over there. Yes, Islam does have something called jihad, there's no denying that. Mainstream Muslims view jihad as some type of just war theory. There are times when you need to fight. There are radicals that will take that interpretation and they will misuse it and take their version of fighting against the oppressor into what you see of ISIS. And Muslim theologians like myself, it is our job to challenge those interpretations of Islam. I am doing them. As I told you, I'm on the assassination list of ISIS because I'm a very vocal critic. But as an American, not just as a Muslim, as an American, it is also my job to point out that we have really messed around in the affairs of that region for the last 35 years. And there are going to be repercussions to a lot of what we're doing in that region. It's not justifying it, it's simply contextualizing it. So that's my point when it comes to Islamic terrorism. One needs to look at the entire picture, not just the text of the Quran, but also the socio-political circumstances that have been created by many entities, us being the number one on that list.
I'm assuming Muhammad might want to, since he's coming from an Islamic background, he might want to respond.
Sure. Do we want to skip?
Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying in the sense of a lot of it is related to foreign policy. But on the other hand, there is scriptural evidence and history of Islam that also leads into that. If you're taught from a young age that your view is the right view, and it is the best view, you presume that you should be the most powerful, most advanced society. When that doesn't happen, there must be external factors to blame. There's a widespread victim complex kind of thing going on where all problems that occur in the Muslim world are the fault of another, no matter who the other is. If you go to Iran, it's the fault of the UK. In Iraq, it's the fault of the US. And it's not to say that the US is not to blame. If you look at history, colonialism, American foreign policy, we have a long history of interfering, and all of that does have blowback. But on the other hand, Wahhabism arose before there was colonialism. It had nothing to do with that. Expansionist wars were waged by Muslims themselves. India, I moved from Pakistan, was attacked by Muslims about 1,000 years ago when it was attacked. Hundreds of thousands of people were enslaved. For that era, that was perfectly normal. All countries used to do that. Rome did that. Other nations did that. But we're not clinging to the fact that those eras were moral. And in Islam, we still look back at the original times, Muhammad's era or the early caliphs, or all of those were actually moral. We need to differentiate between certain actions of that era were wrong. And if we start teaching that among our preachings, it'll be far harder for somebody to radicalize instead of romanticizing the past.
Isn't that broad enough? Can we even broad that though? I mean, if we're talking about people sticking to scriptures and not allowing any sort of interpretation, not allowing any sort of admission that morality changes over time, we can look at the Quran, we can look at the New Testament, we can look at the Old Testament. That's why you've got so many different people claiming to be Muslims with very, very differing views. So many people claiming to be Christian with very, very differing views in Judaism. And they all think that their word is perfect. They all find their phrases in their Quran, in their holy books, and say, okay, this book is perfect. So isn't the flaw here, isn't the problem the concept that the books are flawless?
Generally, yes, that is a problem, but at least from what I've seen and what I grew up around, in Christianity, or particularly in Judaism, the vast majority do not believe that it is flawless. If you look at the Old Testament, there are lots of very violent verses in there. That genocide is mentioned in the Old Testament, but if you talk to the average Jew, they will not talk about that as being divine or something that needs to apply to the present day. If you talk to the average Muslim, whatever is in the Quran is eternal and must be taken at face value. For example, there's a verse about a husband's right over a wife, and it talks about beating your wife. If you talk to a feminist Muslim in the 21st century, they will try to contextualize it and find excuses for it. They will never say that the verse was wrong or it's outdated now.
It took us a grand total of 5 minutes to devolve into a particular Islam session between a back and forth.
Yes.
And this is exactly what I was kind of concerned about, because this panel does not seem to be set up quite fairly. We don't have an ex-Christian on the panel or an ex-Jew on the panel.
This is so.
So if you want to, we can talk about an Islamic issue back and forth, but I need to be given the same amount of time, and we need to...
I agree. Would you like to?
So we're going to move into an...
No, we're not. I just didn't know.
That's what it's devolving into.
This was a very brief discussion.
I would actually like to pull away from that, but before I do that, I would like to give you an opportunity if there was a specific point.
Very well. I think that every single religious tradition has this trend of viewing its scripture as being flawless and immutable. I think every religious tradition has its fanatics. All you need to do is look at Israeli settlers and what they're doing in the name of Judaism, and I don't think that's correct mainstream Judaism, but they are out there. Secondly, I think it is also, I think all of us in this room, whether we're of faith or without faith, need to be humble enough to realize that at some level, pretty much every doctrine views itself as being better than other doctrines, even if it is secularism or humanism. There is this notion or element, even amongst many of us in this room, that others need to conform to our understanding of morality. So let's be fair here, that as we're criticizing others, automatically there is this inherent assumption, as we're criticizing them, that my understanding is superior. Now, at times that might be black and white, but at times it does get murky. And I think this is one of those areas here where, in the end of the day, every one of us has a set of values that we're very passionate about, and we feel strongly that other people of society should live up to those values. Some people call it secularism, others call it religion, but there are values that most of us do believe should be universal.
But you didn't address the point that Muhammad made about the fact that Muslims think that every verse in the Quran is perfect. Do you?
I believe the Quran is the word of God, yes. So I don't think I would classify myself as a Muslim if I rejected the Quran. That's my personal opinion.
So is rejecting one phrase in the Quran, is looking at some section of the Quran, in your view, rejecting all of the Quran?
So you're being extremely simplistic here. The word rejection is a very black and white term. Can the Quran be interpreted in different ways at different times? Yes, it can.
No, I mean, there are words in the Quran that are...
We should probably move because we got started a little bit late. And I would like to go ever so slightly off script and stick with this first question just a little bit, but in a much broader way, and play a variation of that old TV game show, Match Game. You guys remember Match Game? You don't? So I will put forward a sentence, and it will end with blank, and you need to fill in the blank. And the sentence is, and I think that Gene Rayburn used to always do, Dumb Dora was so dumb, and the audience would say, how dumb is she? She thinks every member of my religion or my worldview is blank. And just a word or a sentence. Immoral. Immoral.
Simply trying to assimilate.
The answer I'll give is led around unthinking.
Narrow-minded and bigoted.
All right. And that leads us into the next question, which is, what are the drivers? What are the engines? Why do the people in the general public have these ideas? Can you give us some idea? Because they're pervasive and they don't seem to go away.
Well, there is a fault within Christianity, how we represent our views. So people on the outside, they only really know about us what they see. And so if we come across reactive, if we come across unreflective, then people's perceptions of us are accordingly, they fit. If we come across thoughtful about what we believe, even affirming scriptural authority, affirming the Bible, taking the Bible as the entire Word of God, and owning up to difficult places in the Bible, helping people understand what those places are about, what's going on in those particular places, then it's a different fragrance that's left with people, rather than if your exposure to Christianity has been of the Bible thumper, God says it, I believe it, that settles it, then your view of Christian faith and people is going to be framed within that. If you've been around a Christian who's very thoughtful, who's been patient with your questions, who has listened, who has engaged with you, who's been very friendly with you, then you're going to have a more favorable view. So some of what persists in the public persona is what happens to just about everything in the public persona. It gets all kinds of elasticity. It's pulled in all kinds of directions. It's like a Stretch Armstrong doll. Since we're reaching back in cultural references.
So I said immorality, that people think that atheists are immoral, and that is because religion says that about us. Religion loves to take credit, and I'm speaking big picture religion here. I'm not just talking about Christianity and Islam. I'm talking about religion. Loves to take credit where it's not due. And one of the things that centers around is, well, whatever good morals you have comes from religion. Religion gives you the guidance, religion gives you the advice, religion gives you the word of God, the word of the holy book, and without that, you can't be moral. So the reason that people have such a view of atheism is that that's exactly what religion tells them. If not overtly, it implies it, that without religion, you can't be moral. And that's why the most common question I get, well, where do you get your morality from? Well, atheists get their morality from the same places that religion gets their morality. The religious people get their morality. The only difference is, of course, religion takes the credit where it can. Atheists take the credit and the blame on their own. So when we're talking about why atheists are viewed as immoral, they're the outgroup. They're the last outgroup. And the last outgroup so all that comes from religion, specifically religion, demonizing its outgroup. You need to be here. You're good because we let you be good. You're good because we taught you to be good. Those who haven't been part of us, they're not good.
Well, I think just leading off from where you finished, I think the paradigms are very different. For Muslims, by and large, and I think Christians and Jews would be, I think many of them would be the same. It is true that morality is the basis of religion, but for most Muslims, morality would not be something that radically changes. As I said in my last answer, yes, fine-tuning can be done, yes, reinterpretation, but we're not going to change from black to white, from lightness to darkness. It's not going to be a complete 180 when it comes to morality, and I think many other Christians and Jews would also say the same thing. So if we were having this discussion maybe 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, the points of contention would be different from your side. But my religion and other understandings of conservative religions would relatively be the same. I.e., one of the criticisms that atheists have of conservative Muslims, which is a valid criticism, is that by and large they don't change with time. There's only fine-tuning going on. That's a valid criticism. Because from our perspective, morality does not radically evolve or change. There's only, minutiae that the law allows for change. So it is possible that 100 years from now, your descendants, basically, intellectual descendants, are going to be criticizing religion for a whole different list of reasons that probably haven't even occurred to you today, right? And we're still going to be kind of going along the same path. So the two paradigms are very different, as we're trying to say.
So if we were to take that to a next step, if we're talking about today's Islam, does today's Islam not talk poorly about atheists? Does today's Islam not say that atheists are less moral and less valid, less valuable in society?
Not less human, but the mainstream Muslims, yes, it is true, would view atheists as not having as much of a moral background or moral backbone than they do. That's true. That's a fact. I can't deny that.
More than moral background, it's okay to kill us.
Well, that is the law in 14 countries. That's true. But you're sitting here. I'm sitting here. Am I threatening you?
Let's kind of get back to the narrower thing. Well, what are the drivers of the misconceptions about Islam? I mean, I think some are very clear and out there.
Well, as I said, one of the fundamental differences is that there are two different paradigms. By and large, Muslims do believe that morality does not radically change from generation to generation. So there is going to be some consistency. Whereas those who are not following any type of conservative religious tradition, because I'm not alone here. Many Christians and Jews would kind of agree with this. Those that are not following these types of views, well, the fact of the matter is their understanding of morality will change with time. So there are criticisms against those who don't change because they're not changing. Do you understand what I'm saying? There's a paradigm.
Yeah, morality changes and you stay the same, you're going to be seen as backwardly moral.
Yes, that was my point. Two different paradigms.
So I would argue that is exactly true in the sense that morality does change in religious groups as well. It changes more slowly. If you look at slavery, all religious groups condone slavery. Now they do not. The thing is, religion applies brakes and slows down progress. It usually is not able to completely halt it.
That's a very valid point, and I'm happy you brought that issue up. This goes back to exactly what I was saying, is that and I'm of course a religious scholar and an academic professor, so I can speak as both. From my perspective as a religious scholar, as a theologian, slavery is definitely one of those issues that Islamic law does allow for change and reforming. Just like with Christianity, that there were times when slavery was justified, and now I don't know of any Christian theologian that is justifying slavery. In our times, ISIS has reintroduced slavery, and the entire Muslim world has basically been aghast and refuted them. So these are one of the mechanisms. I'll give you another example. Murder. Islam is never going to turn around and say murder is permissible in certain circumstances, because the texts are crystal clear. The texts on slavery, I think, are pretty clear, and this is what most of the mainstream Muslim world says as well, that it's not something that is binding, that has to be done. It was something that was practiced. Islam doesn't force or command to have slaves. And when there were times when there were slaves, there were slaves. Well, now that there's no slaves, nobody's resurrecting this law or there is no law, excuse me. Nobody's resurrecting this culture and saying this needs to be done. So we cannot
ISIS is doing
equate.
what you just said, that ISIS is doing
It
it.
is doing that, yes.
What are the cultural drivers that perpetuate misconceptions about Christianity?
Well, let's take slavery as an example. So the New Testament addresses slaves as slaves. And Christianity has had a very checkered history with slavery. I won't try to deny that we've had Christians who have advocated for it. We've had Christians who have fought against it. And so that looks almost schizophrenic. So what's going on? Why is there this war within Christianity? And so if you take New Testament references to slavery, a modern reader will read back into a reference to a slave as a slave in the New Testament context. They will read back into that a New World experience of slavery, which was fundamentally race-based and rights-denying. First century slavery was not race-based and rights-denying. However, it was still ownership of one person over another. The apostles recognized that as a problem. They also recognized that the only antidote for that was the gospel of Jesus, which is an equalizing philosophy, if you want to use that term. It's an equalizing way of life. And so in the first century, into the second century, you see the church, slaves are treated as free people in the church. While the institutional shell of slavery remains, it's effectively gutted within Roman society by the move of Christianity. Now, again, as I said, we have a very checkered history with this. And so you get into a New World context and you find all kinds of problems with this, and I won't try to deny that. But I will say that cultural driver of what is a problem, a lot of times you will find people who will just, almost like a matter of something that everybody knows. Well, everybody knows the Bible supports slavery. And again, reading the Bible within its context, there's not a support of slavery. There is a recognition of slavery, and there is a addressing of slavery. But the way to fight against it was not to call for a revolution. It was to share the gospel. And as people began to see themselves in Christ, for instance, take the New Testament book of Philemon, a great letter to read, a small, tiny New Testament postcard, where you find Paul advocating for a runaway slave, sending him back to his owner to make the right wrong, but saying to the owner, I want you to treat him as a brother. I don't want you to view him anymore as a slave. And that was the gospel at work. But nevertheless, it still persists that the New Testament morality is flawed because slaves are dressed as slaves. And in a modern context, we read that as why would the apostles call for emancipation? You know, they ought to call for emancipation. And that could have happened. But what happened was that there was a move toward, we focus on the gospel, and that fundamentally changes the way people see each other.
As a member of the media, I would like to maybe take my share of blame in some of the misunderstandings and ask you guys if what I'm hearing is that at root, and very oversimplified, so many of the problems, mischaracterizations, stem from being monolithically defined. Is that a problem in the public relations of the organizations, or is it in the way you were defined publicly by in the media? What's the source of this monolithic definition of the various faiths or worldviews?
If I can start from that, within my own family, I'm an atheist. One of my sisters is a full hijab-wearing Muslim woman, and I'm sure she and Yasir Qazi will have a lot in common. Their worldviews are very similar. My mother, on the other hand, prays 5 times a day, is, in her words, a devout Muslim, but she believes that the Quran is actually wrong. So within Islamic context, there is a lot of variation. It's not a monolith. But you have people trying to push that all Muslims are bad, for example. That kind of narrative exists in the media, and it dehumanizes Muslims. On the other hand, you also have the narrative coming that there's only one right way to practice Islam. There are 100 different ways where there are various sects. People project their own morality onto Islam, and that is perfectly valid. What we need is to accept that there's no one single vision that is okay. There needs to be pluralism and tolerance within our communities.
So when you're talking about the monolith, you're talking about the perfection, the perceived perfection, the insisted perfection of the holy books.
Right.
Okay? People invent their gods. Every single person invents their own, every single believer invents their own God. That's why there isn't a single believer anywhere who thinks their God disagrees with them on morality issues. That's why you've got one Muslim over here and another Muslim over there. They both say, they both have the same holy book, they both point to different passages, and they both have very different moral values. Same with Christians, same with Jews, same with Hindus. But they all say their book is right and perfect. This is the problem, because when you've got a book, when you've got a morality that you think is right and perfect, but you invented the morality, there is no self-reflection. There is only a shield that you put up to protect yourself from criticism. I'm not a bigot. My God is a bigot. I'm just following the word of my God. No, you actually invented the God as a reflection of you. If that weren't true, then people who would be claiming from the same book, people claiming from the same religion, wouldn't be bigots, or would all be bigots if they were true. But the fact is that you can be a Muslim and be anywhere along the scale. And you can be a Christian or a Jew and be anywhere along the scale on morality. Everybody says that their religion is perfect, even though they make it up for themselves. And that's why they have this monolith. That's why we have the problems that we're getting from the religious community. Because everybody is saying, I mean, if you look at the Religious Freedom Restoration now, I'm not a bigot. I don't hate gays, but God does. And that's a problem. And that's where we get the problems that religion causes on all society. That's why religion is a problem in society.
Would anyone else like to address?
I just wanted to add, you asked about the representations of the media.
Yeah, because I'm curious about this.
So
I think
from my perspective, I think there's a number of issues that need to be addressed. Firstly, the issue of selective reporting and aggrandization of stories. So, for example, most of us in this room would not be aware that last week a person in Atlanta tried to plant a bomb in a park and blame it on Muslims. He was caught. It was a very undercover thing. Not too many people are aware of it. However, and he pretended to be, or he tried to blame it on Muslims by putting a Quran in the backpack and whatnot. Turns out he was a self-professed patriot wanting to bring attention to the threat of radical Islam. To which I say it looks like the far right is a greater threat than radical Islam is. But the point being that we hardly heard a blip on any national media. It was just simply not reported. We all know if the person had actually been a Muslim and been caught in the act, how that would have been portrayed. Firstly. Secondly, there is clearly a dehumanization when it comes to a Muslim terrorist and a humanization when it comes to people who commit terror in other faiths or even in other circumstances. Simple example. Last week, this Lufthansa pilot who did what he did, right? Look at the pictures that they're showing of that pilot. He's posing in front of the beach. He's jogging for charity. There's even baby pictures that were published of him, right? Contrast that with when a Muslim does it. Yeah, sometimes Muslims do violent acts in the name of their faith. And you're not going to find pictures of that Muslim, or his family, or what caused him, or, we apparently Muslims don't have somebody that can go crazy. It has to be the religion that told them to do it. So crazy peoples are only the prerogative of normal Caucasians and Christians. Muslims can't flip their switch, basically. See, so there's this dehumanization, and what happens is, after dozens of such episodes, it's kind of, there's this osmosis in the minds of mainstream America. Islam somehow is much worse than any other faith tradition. And I think these are two of many other factors that could be said. The time is limited.
Yes.
I think on this question of media, and I think Dr. Qadi is right. It's monolithic media portrayal is a greater problem for Islam. So to take this pilot in Germany, if let's say that as they go through his apartment and his effects, they find Bible study materials, they find that this guy was active in his church, the media would be surprised by that. The media would react with shock and surprise. This because we don't associate this with Christian action, Christian behavior. Again, Christians have had their share of contributing to the world's pains throughout history, but you don't typically associate the worst of human actions with I bet a Christian did that. So our quibble usually with the media is more of a feeling that the media is driven by a certain secularizing narrative that doesn't give often credit to Christians as thoughtful people. And so the person who gets the microphone stuck in their faith is Bubba. And Bubba says, well, yeah, golly, man, that's not right. That ain't like America. And Bubba is from First Baptist Church, And so a lot of times our most thoughtful representatives of our faith don't get asked, what do you think about this? And when they do, I've known enough reporters through the years to say it's really refreshing to find somebody who articulates a position that is thoughtful and intelligent and obviously has reflected thought.
May I just...
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with what's being said here, except for the secular angle. I believe it's a Christian angle. Most definitely, the media loves to view Muslims in a negative light. And most definitely, I believe it loves to view Christians in the most positive light. A good example is Anders Breivik, the Christian who went to church, the Christian who wrote a book, a treatise on the Knights Templar, the Christian who wrote a note that says, I'm doing this in the name of Jesus, and then went and shot up a bunch of kids in Norway. The immediate response from Fox News was, he's not a Christian. So they went through this long effort. Bill O'Reilly did this on the show all ad nauseum, trying to say, okay, this guy, this person who did horrible things in the name of Jesus in his own writing, he wasn't a real Christian. Now, if that were flipped around, if that were an atheist, if that were a Jew, if that were a Muslim, the story would be completely different. So yeah, I agree that there's a real bias in the news, and it's a problem. And it's not so much, I don't believe it's anti-Muslim or anti-atheist as much as it is pro-Christian.
I'm going to combine the last two questions because we're running short and we're wanting to get to a nice, healthy question and answer in. So I want to ask what kinds of discrimination members of the panel may have faced as a result of these myths and preconceived notions, and to sort of combine that with what we might do to make the conversation more forthright, to kind of end some of these tyrannizing myths for not one group, but all of these groups.
I can definitely begin with that. I think living in America and Tennessee post 9/11 is a very interesting experience for me. There were times where I travel frequently. I'm a very well-known preacher and theologian, and I travel at least 100 days of the year. I'm actually going to London tomorrow morning. So there were times before I was such a high-profile person where every single time I traveled, I would literally get randomly pulled aside. And it even got more embarrassing than that. I'd have police guards meet me at the door of the plane. At times my name has been announced, and it's just so humiliating and embarrassing to have to pull your passport out and all the passengers are staring at you. Then you get thrown into a room and you have no idea how long you're going to stay after a 10-hour flight from Europe or whatever, 7, 8, 9 hours. There were times where they pulled my family and kids aside. My 7-year-old kid asked, "Dad, why are the police being so mean to us?" I didn't know what to tell him at the time. Thank God my profile has now gone so high that the government is hesitant to touch me because they know I have a lot of social media clout. But that's not the case with many other Muslims out there. That's the first one from the government. The second from the public population, I have to say I have faced a lot of bigotry and hatred from the general public, being called things, the vulgar words are used. Bin Laden is still alive. When people see me, they say Bin Laden is still alive. I've had people come up to me in the street and basically say, "Get the F out of my country," even though I was born in Texas. People have, there was even, the worst case for me was that my wife and kids were walking on the street here in Memphis, and a group of teenage kids, literally zoomed and swerved the car like 2 feet away from them, yelling things, and I was there, but I was on the pavement. They were on the pavement, but closer to the road, I'm trying to say. The car literally just zoomed up, and it's just very frightening when you have kids, and my wife wears the scarf. So I can definitely tell you that Islamophobia is very real in this country, that there are people that are scared of brown-skinned, Muslim-sounding names of women in hijab, and I think that it's a very, very sad state of affairs that we all need to work to eradicate.
I'm sorry that you.
Jumping off your point, you mentioned the word Islamophobia. I want to take exception with that word, not with the concept. So bigotry exists. I've experienced almost the same things. I've been pulled over in Switzerland. I've been exact same scenarios. I was at an atheist convention in Missouri, and crossing the street, a similar incident happened. A guy pulled up and was Arab, go home. I'm not Arab to begin with. My name is Muhammad. So it's very easy to follow. To an average person, there's no difference between us. But the word Islamophobia tends to conflate criticism of Islam with bigotry towards Muslims. I would appeal that everybody starts using anti-Muslim bigotry. Criticizing Islam, criticizing any idea is imperative. The way we move forward is by criticizing ideas, finding the good parts of them, keeping those and rejecting the bad parts. Putting the idea that any ideology cannot be criticized or criticizing an idea is bigoted is harmful for everybody. So we need to distinguish between those two.
I'd like to say I agree with you that if you don't like the term Islamophobia, I really don't care. As long as we agree there's anti-Muslim bigotry, you can call it anti-Muslim bigotry, that's fine with me.
And very, very quickly before we continue on this line, I think it would be interesting if the two of you maybe address the idea of the fine line between criticizing Islam and where that can become a racist thing.
So as an American Muslim, I have no problem with people like Muhammad or anybody, expressing their views or criticizing whatever they want. My problem comes when you assume I am X, when you want to pull me aside, when you want to try to kill me, when I'm going to have problems getting a job, when people are going to say slurs to my face. That's definitely crossing the line. Me personally, I'm sitting on this panel. I knew Mr. Said would be invited. I know his background. This is America, no big deal. To you, your religion, to me, mine. It's not an issue. So I don't have any problem with criticism and discussion. But I think it's pretty clear when that discussion moves on to bigotry, being singled out, random selections at airports, denying jobs or whatnot. I think that's pretty clear.
Is it a case where very often you see what is broached as criticism of Islam really being sort of functionally xenophobic or racist?
There's a gray area, obviously. So if you think all Muslims somehow, or the majority of Muslims are this, then yeah, it's kind of, you're feeding into those stereotypes. I think it's pretty clear when there's an academic criticism of a concept or theology or juristic opinion, that's clearly a dialogue, versus trying to translate that to show hatred towards you, to try to discriminate against you.
This is a statement from CARE. It's on their website. They're the Council of American Islamic Relations. Islamophobia is closed-minded prejudice against or hatred of Islam and Muslims. An Islamophobe is an individual who holds a closed-minded view of Islam and promotes prejudice against or hatred of Muslims. What's happening over here is that Islam and Muslims are being conflated, which we need to work against.
I agree. I don't have a problem with that.
Let's move on and get a point of view in terms of from the Christian point of view and also from the atheist point of
It
view.
would be disingenuous of me to claim any discrimination. I've not experienced any discrimination. However, that doesn't mean that I would not be empathetic to those who have, because I am biblically obligated to practice hospitality. And the Greek word hospitality means love of strangers. And so for people to treat other people poorly simply based on external dress or color of skin is a deeply anti-Christian, anti-gospel way of believing and responding. We have Muslim friends from Bangladesh, and she wears the hijab, and you will, on a street in Germantown, often see her walking my little boy home. And it has occurred to me that if some guy comes by and wants to make trouble because of the way she's dressed, then my own little boy is in the crosshairs potentially. But the reason he's with her is because she is our friend, and we love her. And she is fully and vibrantly Muslim, and we are fully and vibrantly Christian, and we've been in each other's homes, and we've taught each other how to make certain dishes. I say my wife and she have taught each other different dishes. So there are ways around these particular issues, and I do think you find good exceptions to some of this. And so you do find, for instance, at my oldest son's school, Christian school, one of the teachers has a small group of atheist friends, and they have coffee weekly, and they talk about religion and philosophy and the world, and they have deep differences, but it doesn't keep them from treating each other humanely. And people who fear other people, I wouldn't say the problem is religion. I would say the problem is human nature. And that is the fundamental problem, is that we all carry within ourselves the things that make society difficult, whatever labels we wear in life.
This hotel is about to fill up with about 1,000 people who face bigotry in their lives. Children thrown out of the house from their parents, people who have lost friends, people who have lost family members who have split up, families who have split up, all because of the bigotry against atheists, promoted as gospel, promoted as correct by religion. So when we're talking about bigotry, and yes, bigotry is ugly, bigotry is stupid, bigotry is something that we as a society should be moving beyond, we must look towards religion when we're talking about bigotry against atheists, because religion preaches it. Religion says that morals come from religion. Religion says that people without that religion are less moral, less human, less valid parts of society. This is the problem for atheists. It's not a human nature thing, it is a religion thing, and I can show you that because we don't do it back to you. There's nothing in atheism that says religious people are all stupid, or religious people are bad, or religious people are immoral. This is only coming from religion, and it's all coming under the guise of it's down from God. Again, people are bigoted, and they blame their God as if they use their religion as a shield. They blame their God for giving them the bigotry, and then they defend it, and then they use it as kind of a get out of a conversation free card, get out of bigotry free card. You can't blame me, it's my religion. Oh, it's your religious right. No, it's not. It's ignorance, it's putrid, it's yesteryear, and it needs to go away, and it's up to religion to start preaching tolerance for everybody and not saying that we're better than them.
Well, I think to be fair on that point, I mean, we can trade anecdotes I've read atheist blogs and know that they do descend into name calling. And
Oh yeah, individuals do, but it's not part of atheism.
Yeah, I was gonna say, again, I think this is a question of being monolithic.
So I would say that to this point, I mean, it raises a fundamental difference. When you look at philosophies and religions within humanity, what philosophies and religions, it's an ultimate question, what philosophies and religion have within them, when they're at their best, the power to restrain what are the darker, most negative impulses of human nature. I think when Christianity is at its best, it does that. When people are following Jesus, His way, His will, you get a better quality of person. So,
That's a horribly bigoted thing to say.
well, I'm not. Where in that statement are you hearing that an atheist can? Where are you hearing me say atheism is immoral? And
When you
I'm
say
simply
the
saying
Christians,
at its best,
yeah,
so that when
produces
somebody is
people that-
following Jesus,
uh-huh.
you're going to find a person who is typically, morally, relationally, a person you'd be glad to have as your neighbor, a person who's going to look out for you, a person who's going to exhibit compassion.
You're not saying that's exclusive
I'm not saying
to Christianity. You're just saying that in the case of Christians who are at their best, they are.
I'm not saying you can't. I mean, there are a lot
But at
of.
its best is a judgment call that we're making on an individual level. The Westboro Baptist Church thinks they are Christianity at its best.
Granted, they do. Yeah. But we have ways of assessing whether people are being biblically faithful or not.
They will say that they are being more biblically faithful than
They
you.
will.
This is what the
Look,
problem
if
is.
you want to descend into comparing what atheism has done that's been bad in the world and what Christianity has done that's been bad in the world,
That's not where I'm going, and atheism hasn't done anything. Atheists do it at an individual level.
I'll see your Westboro Baptist and I'll raise you a Stalin. Yeah.
Well, that's difficult. I think it's now maybe time to move into the question and answer period before.
Mind if I make a comment?
Yeah, no, please.
So one of the issues is that if you look at the world from the perspective that this is the right path, no matter what the path is, and if you don't follow it, you'll be tortured and burned forever and ever. It's a natural human impulse that comes from love, that if my child isn't going in this direction, I need to do whatever I can to prevent that, because my child will suffer. A lot of these reactions come from a place of love. So within our group, we have people from about 30 different countries. There's a Somali kid. When he was 16, he left religion. He told his parents. His parents locked him up and beat him. They had the entire extended family get together. There's an Iraqi girl, she was 19. Her family kicked her out and threatened to kill her. And the point was they were trying to scare her to come back to religion. If you view that this is the only way, extreme reactions are understandable, because if they aren't able to reform the child will suffer greatly. Taking it onto a global level, that's why we have these laws as well. The idea is that if you leave religion, you will corrupt society, and all of these people. So it's better to cauterize the wound right now and eliminate this infection before it spreads, and a lot of other people have to suffer. That's why historically, and as I was saying, in a lot of Muslim countries, these laws still exist. I would ask Yasser Bali and any other Muslims. So from my perspective, it's a moral imperative that people that live here that have the ability to affect change in other countries do so. And Muslims over here are uniquely positioned to be able to lobby to end blasphemy laws, lobby to end apostasy laws, and all of us should be working to achieve that.
I think you're making American Muslims far more powerful than they are. Our voices are not heard in the Middle East, not just because of a language barrier, but because of an authority barrier. People who are born and raised and graduated from their versions of seminaries are considered to be far more authoritative in their religion than a person born in Texas, even if he studied a few years and then come back here. So I think you're kind of making it bigger, or making our role bigger globally.
I'm not saying it is right now. I'm saying it can be and it should be.
Maybe.
If you look at
Maybe.
ex-Muslims, we're a tiny percentage, and we're standing up. I would say we're looking at a burning building and running back into it because we see a problem and want to fix that problem for our people that are in other countries. And the same exists for other minority groups that want to fix the problems they see.
Very well. I just have to say here that Muslims are 1.6 billion people. To assume that one person or one group will somehow speak or influence all of them, I'm far more pragmatic. I am concerned with American Islam, or even Western Islam at a broader level. I'm concerned with Muslims living in secular democracies and navigating our faith through modernity. And that's really what my role is. If you Google my name, I'm sure you know a little bit about me in this regard. I'm more concerned with American Islam. Blasphemy laws in Pakistan, I mean, theoretically they're interesting and I would love to talk about them, but I don't think I'll influence or have any. Personally, I really don't believe they're valid or Islamically sound, but
So you oppose them?
yes, definitely, yes.
Okay.
But
We do need to move on to the question and answer portion of this opening meeting. And before we turn to the audience and the questions on the note cards, is there anyone here from the media that has a question that they would like to ask the panel generally, or any specific member of the panel? Anyone? I haven't seen any cards. Has anyone collected the question cards?
I can collect them if you want.
Could you please?
If you have cards.
I'll do my best. This is for the Reverend. It seems to me that the press, is that correct? Especially television and radio newscasters promote a belief in Christianity and in...
Sorry, I had a martini before I came up.
That's all right.
If you want to go ahead and ask me, I'll be happy.
Your penmanship is wonderful. Do you want to say this out loud, because I can't?
You want me to read it?
Yeah, would you mind?
Are you asking me to?
Yes, it's for you, Reverend. It seems to me that the press...
Is this one? I don't think this is on.
Hello?
Oh, yeah, this is
It seems to me that the press, especially television and radio newscasters, promote a belief in Christianity and miracles. For instance, if someone survives a plane crash or a tornado where many others are killed, newscasters will often say it was a miracle that so-and-so survived. However, they never question the miracle that caused the plane to crash or the tornado to occur. Were the deaths caused by these events also a miracle? Who is responsible for causing these events if God caused a miracle to save a certain person?
Okay, thank you for your question. I don't know that there really is much of a theology that informs when people are making those comments. I don't know that they're thinking through a theological construct. You're asking a question from the vantage point of when media is out as report on things, so that, the plane crashes, 2 people survive, everybody calls it a miracle. And I think they're probably using miracle in the general sense that a lot of people use the word sin, about the sins of the government or something like that. It's not necessarily a theology is attaching to that. So if you come into a church and you hear a pastor say that 2 people survived this crash and it's a miracle, essentially what he is saying is that he may not be really thinking about it much either. He's saying that what we expect to have happen in that moment, 2 people survived through it. I don't use the language of the miraculous very often.
I guess it's the same way not only newscasters, but people will say, and I hear this almost daily in my job, that people survive some operation or cancer or something.
Sure.
God saved me, but who caused the disease in the first place? I mean,
I understand where you're going.
I talked to, I was questioned by CNN not too long ago. They were doing a special on a plane crash. And this plane crash had one survivor, a little girl. And they were doing a special on the miracle of her survival. And they said, well, what do you give? And they didn't use me for the special because what I gave them was not friendly. It was right on the line. It was right on, God caused the plane crash. God killed all those other people. God chose those other people to die. God picked this one little girl to live. Why? And they actually have a condition called survivor guilt, which is when you survive a plane crash or an event that other people die, and you think God wanted it that way. And you feel guilty that God picked you over other people. So this is one of those places, one of those manifestations where religion actually serves to hurt, where you can't just say, I got lucky. You've got to say it was divine and God picked me over other people. Why? And it actually causes a bona fide condition of guilt.
How about the tornado with the
We need to do questions on cards. If you have a question, you need to write down on a card. The next question is addressed specifically to the believers on the panel, and it is, have you ever questioned your faith, and do you feel that your morality would diminish without your faith?
I don't mind answering that question. Have I questioned my faith? I have definitely questioned interpretations of my faith. I have evolved over the last 20, 25 years from positions, theological and legal, that I've held. I've never found myself actually questioning the existence of God personally. So I've never had a crisis of that type of faith. Not that the opportunity hasn't arisen, but people are different, and it just hasn't happened to me personally. Do I think I would be less of a moral person if I didn't believe in the scripture? And again, it is my opinion, my personal opinion, that I think I would, because personally I feel more morally responsible knowing that my Creator wants me to live up to a certain standard, that my prophet wanted me to exemplify a certain methodology. Now, it could be biased, or obviously I'm biased. I don't know what life would be like without those things in place. So for me personally, I personally cannot see myself being as moral as I am. But I have no problems admitting that, of course, I'm biased, because I've never stepped outside my paradigm.
Differently moral, would you say? I mean, is it necessarily diminishing, or would it just be differently moral?
So again, I would define morality in a different manner. So from an Islamic perspective, it's immoral to take drugs. It's immoral to drink and become drunk. Maybe some people don't think that's immoral.
Are these expressly the things, or is this the purview of disbelief? Is that how
No,
it's
immoral. I
defined?
mean, you use the word immoral.
Right.
So for me, it's immoral. It's just not morally right to take drugs.
Gotcha.
So I think if I didn't have the religion, maybe I would do these things.
But I guess I'm asking is based on that, is the assumption that people who lack belief are more likely to take drugs and drink alcohol and live a wild life? Is that the
Definitely
is that the residue?
Well, I'll be honest, that is the assumption. That is the assumption. Yeah.
Okay.
Mind if I add a comment?
Sure.
It was mentioned before that slavery is not expressly prohibited. What Dr. Yaprani just said was that alcohol is expressly prohibited. You can look at the moral scale.
So I would answer the question the same way, pretty much the same way as Dr. Cotty, in that I've never personally had reason to question that God is there or that He can be personally known. I was raised in a Christian home. I had opportunities, as Dr. Cotty has had through studies, to engage with people who don't believe, people who've lost belief, people who've never had it. I've walked with a number of people who are questioning their faith, and I hope that our church is a safe place for people to question their faith and to work through doubts. But personally, I've never gone through that. As to morality, what I'm more interested in as I get older is a morality that transcends self-interest. And that's going to necessitate that at times I need an authority over me to tell me no. So if I have a God who is always, how to put this? If my God is basically a Stepford God, so a God who never contradicts me, a God who never says no to me, then I really have a God of my own making. And so being a sinful person, I have interests and desires that I don't need to act on. And so I need to stay faithful to my commitments. I need to stay faithful to laws. And so morality, a morality that transcends self-interest, is not only self-giving and leads me to sacrifice myself at times when I might want to preserve myself, to give when I might want to keep, but a morality that also tells me no. I can't have that, even though I may want it and desire it, because it's not good for me or it's not good for someone that I love.
All right, David, I might actually want to, I know this was addressed specifically at the non-believers, but this might be an interesting opportunity. You identify both as atheist and as Jewish, is this correct?
No, I used to.
You used to?
But no,
I'm just curious, because Judaism, and we don't have a representative, and I know that there's a tradition of kind of wrestling with faith and wrestling with the ideas, and I didn't know if you could.
Well, in Judaism, there's a tradition of argument. Okay,
Right.
The old joke is if you get 3 Jews in a room, you get 4 opinions. Right? So they argue with each other, and that's part of the mentality. I don't like to call it a Jewish culture because the Jewish culture isn't real either, but the mentality of Judaism is that it's okay to question everything except the existence of God. But that leads to people questioning the existence of God, and that's why there's a whole lot of atheists who call themselves Jews, like I once was. And I think that I think that's a good thing, because it gets people to really deal with their doubts. So really, I have kind of a tough question to my religious friends. You both just said that neither of you have questioned the religion in which you were raised. So I'd like to ask you each a question about each other. Is it a good thing or a bad thing that the other person has not questioned his faith?
I personally believe that if a person feels a connection with a higher power, call him God, that is a very positive thing for society. I don't mind the religiosity of a fundamentalist Christian as long as it doesn't lead to bigotry of others. Like I like Christians and Jews and people of faith that are religious, and I find a connection with them.
But would it benefit him, would it be better for him, do you think he should consider dropping Christianity for Islam?
Only if he wants to. If he wants to, it's his decision.
Same deal. It's not, it's no compulsion.
Do you think he's going to hell?
To believe.
No, well, in Islamically, I have an academic paper on this, by the way. You should reference this. The orthodox theological position of Islam is far more nuanced than a black and white.
Well, I was talking to the father, to the Reverend Cole. You think he's going to hell? Don't you think he should consider Christianity? Don't you
I think he should consider Christianity, but I respect his intellect, and I respect that he makes choices in life, and I have no reason to distrust Dr. Cotty's intellect or the way that he thinks about things. So my approach to Dr. Cotty, if we were talking about matters of Christianity, what Christianity affirms that one needs to believe for a right relationship with God, I would affirm all those things to him, but in friendship and in a desire to continue friendship with him. The friendship wouldn't be based on any thought of even eternal destiny or of anything other than let's be friends and let's engage with each other as we wish on these points. Let's talk about them, and that's what we would do. But I never force decisions upon people. We present the truth plainly. This is what the New Testament says. We commend ourselves in a good conscience. We present the truth plainly, and we allow the truth to do the work that it does.
This question is for David Silverman specifically. What do you mean when you say religion takes the credit, and what's not written is for morality? And where do you get your morality?
That's exactly what I was saying before. Religion takes the credit. Religion tells you you're a good person, and it is in the book. That's why you're a good person. Religion tells you that it teaches you morality. religion does not teach morality. Because religion is so broad, all of religion is so broad, it just teaches you what you already know. So religious people get their morality from the same place as atheists. The only difference is that religious people go to church.
Can you define that place? What's the place that it comes from?
Oh, society.
Okay.
Society, our upbringing, our brains, a very, very complex web of our society, of our upbringing, our parents, our experiences. It's a complex thing. That's why there's so much breadth in Christianity, so much breadth in Judaism, so much breadth in the morality of these religions in Islam, because it all really doesn't come from those religions. It comes from the rest of that web. But then religion comes in and says, aha, you don't believe in killing people. Well, it says in my book that you don't like to kill, that killing people is bad, therefore we gave you this. But they didn't. They just took credit. So religious people and atheists get their morality from exactly the same places. None of it is religion. Religion simply takes the credit, and that makes a bigotry. That creates the bigotry. When religion says, we teach you morality. When somebody says, if I left my religion, I would lose my morality. That's an evidence of the bigotry against atheists that religion creates.
All right, this is a question for the panel, and it is, I think I'm reading this correctly, and if I'm off, then someone can correct me. Why do the majority of scientists profess to be non-believers or non-religious or non-believers? And I think there's actually a figure attached to that. Is it something like 80%, 85%?
I believe it's 92.
Is it 92%?
Yeah, it's about learning. Science is learning. Okay? Science is, all right, well, I think it's this way, let's test it. Oh, look, that test failed. All right, maybe it's something else, let's test that. Oh, that test works. Well, what do you think? Well, let me try it. Oh, look, that test works for me too. Peer review. That's the way it works. That's science learning. But when you're looking at religion, religion says, this is the way it works. God made the universe 6,000 years ago in 6 days. Well, we can test and disprove that. Okay? In the beginning, God created heaven and the earth. The earth was waste and void. Darkness was upon the face of the deep. And God said, let there be light. It clearly says earth came before light. Well, we can disprove that. So the book is not perfect and provably so. So that's what makes it atheists.
Let's move down to the end of the table.
I don't have statistics memorized, but I would venture if you were to ask Muslim scientists in Muslim-majority countries or Christian scientists in Africa or Hindu scientists in India, you would not get the statistics of American scientists in America. A little bit of postmodernism would tell us that we're all products of our own civilization and culture, and the very fact that agnosticism and atheism is so high in certain parts of the world and not in others reflects the changing morality and the paradigm shift taking place amongst us. And therefore, I think it's highly skewed and selective to say that 92% of scientists believe X when you're viewing or when you're interviewing scientists of a certain geographic region of a certain time and place. Most scientists, even of medieval Christianity, even in post-Enlightenment, even Darwin himself, some would argue, and again I know there's a dispute here, were some type of deists or some type of religious people. Most of the founding fathers were not quite Christian, yet they were also religious in their own way. So all of us, including myself, are products of our time and place. And I think a little bit of humility and also studying postmodernism would kind of make us realize why the statistics are so high for one particular location at one particular time.
May I respond to that? Sure. Because when we're talking about America, and yes, 92% ideal is American, okay? But we have a dramatic minority here. Most of those 92% of scientists were raised Christians. They weren't raised atheists. This isn't an atheist country. We're not living in Scandinavia here. We're living in America. Most of these scientists were raised Christians and were convinced to be atheists, one would logically speculate, that from the evidence that they found in science. Don't you think?
But it's raised Christian within a very different political, cultural context. Is that?
That's my point as well, that Christians of Africa are not the same as Christians of America, Hindus of India, Buddhists.
Yeah, but they made the change.
Yeah.
One thing is you need space to be able to dissent and think things out critically. So for example, in Pakistan, There's a Muslim scientist, Pervez Gupta. He's a reformist. He wants science to be taught. Evolution is not taught in Pakistan. There have been attempts to kill him, just for being progressive enough that we should teach the entire spectrum of science. If you don't have enough space to think about science, good science won't happen in those countries, and people can't publicly talk about what they actually believe in.
Okay. I think we probably got time for one more question, if we keep it pretty brief. And it is specifically for Dave. Have you ever done anything as head of American Atheists which, in your own judgment, reinforced any misconceptions about atheists?
Well, I think one of the misconceptions about atheists is that we're angry, is that we're all angry, and sometimes I can get pretty angry. Yeah, so, I mean, there's that, okay? And yeah, I knowingly do that. I have to do that because anger is what gets played. Anger is what gets news. And when somebody gets in my face, I get angry about it. And of course, when we're talking about bigotry, when we're talking about the negative effects of religion on society, the multiple negative effects, I get angry. And so we have these debates on television, and I have these debates where it can get pretty heated. And I think that reinforces, unfortunately, the negative stereotype that atheists are angry. Because, you know, like we all have seen, you know, one person does represent, you know, just like Bubba. But I think that's an incredibly important thing to do because, damn it, I am angry. And I have to express that.
Now, this was aimed at Dave, but I would like to extend it to the rest of the table. Have you ever participated in anything that, in your judgment, might have helped to reinforce some of the stereotypes that the general public holds?
So the general public holds the idea that the only reason people leave Islam is to drink. I do drink.
I'm sure I have. I'm sure I've gone to events and been present at Christian events where people say, see, all the folks over there. I went to a Promise Keepers event 15 years ago, 16, 20 years ago. So there were a lot of stereotypes that came out of that. So yeah, I'm sure. I think anybody who logs miles leading organizations is going to have times where we become guilty of the very thing that we think we are trying to move against.
Well, according to the TSA's latest blog that was released about suspicious signs when you're traveling, I think I fit the bill for at least 6 of the 30 on that list. Shifty eyes, not staring at people, walking in somewhat of an agitated manner at the airport, rushing to catch your flight. So I think I met
Rushing to catch your flight? How dare you?
Well, if you're a Muslim running in the airplane or in the airport, it kind of does wrong. On a serious note, I honestly can't think of anything, but again, I'm sure people read in when they see someone like me with my name whatnot, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
We are at the end of our allotted time. I would like to thank our distinguished panel, but most importantly, I'd like to thank everyone who came out to have this conversation.
And I'd like to thank you all for coming, and thank you to the rest. Thank you to both for coming. I really appreciate it.
Welcome to Memphis.
Thank you.
Hope you have a good time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.